Do you remember seeing those CDs for sale that would promise you 1000 games into one? Turns out most of them were pretty much the same game, just reskinned, and they wouldn't be that much fun to begin with. Also, you could argue that it was never 1000 games into one. But you know what has a lot of games into one? WarioWare, a series that decided to pretty much ditch the idea of having an actual game, realized that sometimes mini-games are the best part of a game, and decided to make a game that was nothing but minigames, to the point of said minigames being so quick and short, usually requiring pressing only one button in order to win under 3 seconds, that they wouldn't even qualify as minigames anymore, rather as microgames. The concept of microgames was pretty much ahead of its time, as nowadays is the equivalent of doom-scrolling Instagram or YouTube shorts. You barely had the time to perceive what happened that something else entirely is now taking your attention, and it keeps on going. But unlike YouTube shorts, WarioWare games were actually fun, engaging, and sometimes even challenging. Personally, I liked WarioWare Touched for the Nintendo DS a lot, but growing up I shifted away from handheld consoles into just having a PC, and you know, that shift, that change, it wasn't really drastic. I mean, the PC seemed to cover pretty much everything I had played on a console previously in terms of categories, most of the times even better due to a computer having far less limitations than the Game Boy Advance or the Nintendo DS or the 3DS respectively had. But there was an itch that I was never able to scratch with PC games, and that itch was the WarioWare itch. The rapid sequence of fast, fun microgames coming at you, one after another, and the humor they carried within in their absurdity. That was until I discovered Spookware. So what is Spookware? I mean, if the compilation I just showed on screen and the name weren't enough of a giveaway, which I'm surprised they weren't, Spookware is pretty much what will come out if you will combine the humor and absurdity and gameplay of WarioWare games with every horror cliché ever known to man. And this is the short explanation of what Spookware is. The more in-depth explanation is actually going to be pretty much the rest of this video, along with details as to why a game with such an awesome sounding premise, spoilers ahead, ended up failing to deliver. Spookware was developed by Beeswax Games, a studio which also developed a game that might actually be more known to you, namely No Players Online, and is in fact, if you want to be technical about it, a trilogy of 3 different games, with the second game incorporating the first one into itself, then some more unique content, and then a demo for the third game. The first Spookware was initially released on itch.io as part of the 2-Minute Horror Jam, an event about creating short games with unique and surprising mechanisms or unpredictable plot twists, which Spookware managed to hit the mark in that sense, although by trampling a few rules in the jam. Namely, games must be shorter than 2 minutes, which Spookware isn't, provided you do a perfect run on all of the microgames. You need to complete 19 of them without the final boss level, and that will already take over 2 minutes, but I guarantee you, if it's the first time you're playing this game, you're not going to make it on your first try. Yeah, that's right, I just challenged you to attempt to win this on your first try. Come on, pause the video, go to the link in the description and try the game right now. And if you manage to complete it on your very first try, leave a comment saying, "Skill issue, Mr. Archives." As for the second rule, it states that jump scares should be avoided, but the final microgame literally ends in a jump scare. It was unexpected and unpredictable though, so I guess in a way they still follow that rule? Either way, the game did successfully manage to deliver a fresh experience from the usual horror games, garnering a decent amount of success as well for itself, which eventually brought on its second installment, Spookware Watch Party. Watch Party was similar to the first Spookware, but definitely far more polished. Right off the bat we are introduced to 3 characters, giving this game the semblance of a story to set its comedic tone. 3 skeletons, Righty, Meaty and Lefty, whose names, well, I'll let you guess for yourselves why they are named that way, are driving along a road and come up with an idea, a 3 days long horror movie marathon. We don't get to see much of the 3 Scalibros, but their characters will be explored more in the next game. Currently, Spookware Watch Party features a total of 3 chapters. We see that the number of microgames required to finish the chapter has been reduced from 20 to 9, with the first chapter requiring microgames to be played with the arrow keys and the second chapter requiring a mouse, while the third chapter presenting nothing new from what we've seen already, being just an endless mode that combines microgames from both the first and second chapter, and while again rather short of a game by itself, Watch Party already feels like a massive step up from the first itch.io Spookware. The game features some actual characters, a very basic although humorous story, and microgames that feel far more polished and worked on, while still maintaining the inspiration from the original version. Wow, Mr. Archives, you said you will be talking about 3 games, and you already covered 2 of them, so why is the rest of the video so long? Well, the answer to that is quite simple, my child. The final iteration of the game, Spookware, has quite a few differences from the first and second game. While the first itch.io Spookware contained 10 microgames, the second about 20 in total, I think. I haven't counted them to be sure, but the third Spookware, well, it has around 100. That's right, 100 spooky microgames that you are going to play using your mouse, your arrow keys, your keyboard, and at a time a combination of all of them while also featuring an actual story. That's right, we are not just jumping from microgames to microgames. This time we have an actual RPG story in between, with a world to explore, characters to interact and talk with, secrets to discover, and objectives to fulfill and complete, accompanied by extremely corny skeleton jokes. We start the game as a direct sequel to Watch Party. Our 3 Scalbros are still in the basement, and as we finish our first mix of microgames, the Scalbros decide that it was enough movies, and it is perhaps time to do something with their life, with their death. Either way, we now get to know these characters a little bit better, and we also see that their design has been changed a bit since the previous game, but still retains their original personality and style. Lefty, the blue skeleton, is the runt of the 3 brothers. Small, cute, shy and innocent, most of the time he is the voice of reason of the trio. Midi, the green skeleton, is the one usually responsible for maintaining the balance in the group. He tends to push Lefty when needed, helping him overcome his anxieties and boosting his self-confidence, while attempting to also keep Righty on a leash and making sure he doesn't go too crazy all the time. He's also a good cook and plays the guitar, definitely a jack of all trades, definitely the wild card of the group. Righty, the red skeleton, is the big bro of the 3. Is rash, impulsive, and always ready to dive headfirst into any situation or opportunity for chaos presented to him. He is generally the first one to always take action, and while his decisions seem questionable at times, he always manages to somehow pull through for his brothers. He's also quite good at picking locks with his bony fingers. The trio works exceptionally well together. They always compensate for each other's weaknesses while supporting their strengths, and they are pretty charming characters in fact. Personally, Righty is my favorite of the 3. The first chapter is the Scalabros deciding to finally attend school for the first time in their life, or in their death. Okay, I promise I won't do this joke a third time. And so they hop in Righty's car and head to school, where they will attend a grand total of 1 class, fall asleep, and then proceed to graduate. But not before gathering the 5 most talented musicians in the school in order to set up a graduation ceremony performance. In this chapter, the theme of the microgames is rhythm, and they're all played with the arrow keys, more frequently than not, the left and right ones. It's also important to note that throughout these episodes we can find secret microgames by interacting with the other skeletons in the world, microgames that once found will be added to our collection and that we will be able to either replay or add to our microgame mixes in the future. Think of it as the game's reward for exploring around the various dialogues. As the 3 Scalabros graduate from high school, they decide that before starting to work it might be time to take a leap year, or at least a small vacation, and that's how they make their way on a cruise ship, except that something goes terribly wrong. Someone has been murdered, and their bones have been scattered across the cruise ship, and it is now up to Detective Lefty and his 2 helpers to find the bones and the culprit, turning Chapter 2 into this investigation murder mystery story. Throughout this chapter, while investigating the murder, the 3 will end up meeting with Mr. Blue, a skeleton with a bit of a kleptomania problem. By the end of the mystery, we find out that the captain of the ship that was murdered was in fact not murdered. Nobody did it. He simply sort of misplaced his bones around. In this chapter, the theme of the microgames are, well, obviously mystery, and they are played by mostly dragging the mouse rather than just clicking. As the cruise reaches its end, the three Scalibros meet once again with Mr. Blue, who is being sent to prison for stealing a bunch of stuff on the cruise ship, and he decides to bestow a gift upon the three Scalibros. He informs them that he has a restaurant in Bonehattan and would like for them to take care of it, which they agree to. Episode 3 takes place in this big city, as we manage this initially small, crappy restaurant. So far we had to play a series of microgames at the end of each chapter, but here we will have to go through this chapter's microgames mix multiple times, as we are also at the same time managing a minigame related to the restaurant, where we have to seat customers, take orders and prepare food by completing the microgames. Throughout this chapter we keep finding new recipes that are going to be added to the possible microgames in the restaurant. The theme of this chapter is obviously cooking, and it's played with the arrow keys. By the end of the chapter, the Scalibros are visited by Death itself, which they mistake for a culinary critic, and also upon writing the script I realized that Death is portrayed by this skull, the same one that jumpscared us in the very first HIO Spookware game. Talk about continuity, huh? Anyway, as this chapter ends, the Scalibros end up with a very successful restaurant, and they also end up in jail for tax evasion. Turns out that while they were racking up the dough with their 3-star Michelin restaurant, they never paid taxes. And this leads us to Chapter 2, Episode 1, The Prison. This is where the game's problems begin. First of all, I must point out of every chapter, this has to be my least favorite. The story is alright, it revolves around the Scalibros meeting up with Mr. Blue and the four of them concoct a plan in order to escape from jail, and that's fine, I mean it's a pretty interesting story, but the microgames in this chapter are definitely my least favorites. They all revolve around using your keyboard to either type words or letters in certain combinations, which is, you know, it's alright, but some of these microgames are just the exact same one, reskinned. Also, a pretty huge bug is present in this level that will make you hate your life if you're an achievement hunter or a game completionist. You see, after finishing a microgame series from a specific episode, you get a rank based on how well you performed. Getting an S rank requires for you to finish the entire mix without making any mistakes. Now, if you finish a microgame mix, the story does go forward, but nothing stops you from revisiting past locations in order to reattempt those mixes and earn your S rank. It's also pretty important to note that the only way to unlock a microgame to your collection in the basement, which is where you can pick and choose your own mixes for endless mode, requires you to beat said microgame first. Now the real problem with this level, and only this level specifically, is that it's bugged. Once you finish the final mix, you cannot reattempt it ever again. For some reason, entering the room which will allow you to replay the mix simply locks you inside and prevents you from doing anything. So if you complete the mix, maybe missed a few microgames there and didn't get an S rank, thinking that you could come back to it at a later point, no, you can't. The only way for you to get that S rank and unlock the microgames you happen to make a mistake on during the mix is for you to wipe the save file. You have to restart the game from the beginning. Yes, that includes every previous chapter so far. Every dialogue that you went through, every secret that you unlocked, you have to redo all of that. Believe me when I say that I was a bit more than pissed when I realized that to be the case. So if you are going to play this, I heavily recommend to try and get a perfect score on this mix the first time around, so you can at least make sure all of the tapes are revisited and get your completionist itch scratched for this game. Episode 2 of Chapter 2 takes place on a train. After escaping from prison, the Scalibros now find themselves on a train, but suddenly Death appears and it summons an alien invasion for whatever reason. This episode is probably the most microgame intensive out of all. There are no fetch quests, no dialogue that one must go through, we simply just navigate from one wagon to the next, confronting aliens in a very unique sequence of microgames, by the way, which we play by using both the mouse and the keyboard, with each microgame turned into a short first-person shooter parkour level. Yep, you heard it correctly. Every microgame in this episode takes place in a fully rendered 3D environment. As we reach the end of the train, we confront Death itself in a series of 3D FPS microgames, and as we slap Death in the face, the train derails and we find that the three Scalibros have now been caught by the Milk Gang, which apparently was transporting large quantities of milk on that train, and now wants the Scalibros to join their gang in order to repay their debt over the spilled milk. By this point, I have to say, despite how silly and absurd the story was, I was pretty engaged. Just who was this death figure, and why was it tormenting the three Scalibros? What was the deal with the milk gang, and what sort of crazy hijinks they will be up to now? Will they ever get to see Mr. Blue again? So I prepare to launch myself into the next episode and... locked under DLC? Well, that's annoying, but hey, I'll gladly pay to see this game to its conclusion and get to play more microgames, except there's no DLC for sale. There never was. Yep, this is it. This is the entire game, and what you just saw was pretty much the ending. After finishing episode 2 from the second chapter, we are left with a bunch of locked levels that we cannot access because they were never developed, and they never will be. And this is not just the case of the game being an alpha or early access state, this is the complete release. There is even a note on the Steam store page detailing this exact thing. Development of Spookware has ended, and the game is in its final state. The Steam page reflects what is currently in the game, and though in the level select episode 3 and 4 appear, they are not planned for release. The game's content and the game itself is fully playable with all current content. Understandably, this is an element that managed to upset quite a few people. After all, there is nothing worse than being promised something and then never receiving it. I'm going to play the devil's advocate here for a moment and say that on one hand, it is important to keep into consideration that the game is priced at €5, half of that on a discount, which is when I bought it for like €2.74, and I have to say I definitely got my money's worth out of that. Almost €3 for a collection of over 90 horror-based microgames is definitely not that bad of a deal. If you're going to be a completionist about this game, unlocking every achievement and all of the microgames and replaying through them a bunch of times for perfect scores and whatnot will take you 8 hours more or less, which again, it's an actual decent playtime for this price, but it is important to note that the game's price was reduced to €5 only after the final episodes were confirmed to be cancelled, with the game actually costing more prior to that. So technically whoever bought the game before that not only paid more, but also did it with the expectation and promise of additional content that was never delivered, as before the price reduction there was also no statement on the store page stating that the game won't be finished, but it also wouldn't be fair for me to leave out the fact that the developers have apparently reached out to Steam in order to ask them to honor any refund requests, even after the 2-hour play window, with Steam also apparently responding saying that they will do that, which is something very commendable from the developers of the game to do and really fair towards the players. But the price isn't necessarily the issue here. Paying any amount of money for an unfinished game that has no future plans to ever be finished, while for some reason leaving the locked options for the levels that you will never be able to play in the menu instead of simply removing them, does feel like the equivalent of dangling a set of keys in front of a baby, and then just as the baby is about to grab the keys, you take your hand back and toss the keys out of the window. They fall down a sewer drain, never to be recovered, leaving said baby with a forever longing for said keys. It also doesn't help at all the fact that the game, despite being quote-unquote finished, is still riddled with some pretty bad bugs. I mentioned earlier in the video that the bug that prevents you from replaying the final level mix at the end of the prison level, but that's not the only bug present in the game. Certain microgames will sometimes simply show blank screens or missing textures when played during a mixtape, effectively resulting in a loss, and while this hasn't personally happened to me, I've seen quite a few people reporting bugs that will result in the game either soft locking during certain levels, requiring one to restart the level from the beginning, or for the game to lock out all of its content, allowing you to play only the very first level, treating it as a demo version. So now the question lingers, what happened to Spookware? Why did such a promising game get abandoned? First of all, it is important to point out the following fact. While Beeswax Games were the ones responsible for the development of Spookware, the game was published by Dread XP, and if you don't know who Dread XP is, they are the publishers behind quite a few horror games: White Knuckle, Amanda the Adventurer, Dread Delusion, Sucker for Love, and Mortuary Assistant being some of their most notable published titles. The reason behind Spookware being published through Dread XP is because Dread XP was the one who would have provided funding for the game, and the reason why the game was left unfinished is actually explained by the developers themselves through this statement released on the 18th of June 2024. Hey everyone, this is Beeswax Games, the developers behind Spookware. This is a joint statement we are making with Dread XP to clear up confusion about the last statement that was made here on Steam about the status of Spookware. Specifically, we wanted to be more clear about what happened with the game after some confusion started by comments we made on each page. When we signed on with Dread XP for Spookware, the contract had funding outlined for all 4 episodes, but only the first 2 episodes had guaranteed funding, and Dread XP wasn't obligated to fund the remaining episodes if it wasn't viable. After the game didn't sell as well as everyone had hoped, it didn't make financial sense to keep the contract going. At that point, development stopped when episode 2 was done and the contract was completed. We were very fortunate that after we knew funding on Spookware would be ending, we were able to secure funding for our new game, No Players Online, and we have been focusing on that project since then. However, we want to make it clear that since last year, Dread XP has returned the rights to us to work on the Spookware IP. Unfortunately, because we can only work on one project at a time, we want to make sure No Players Online is the best it can be before we start on anything else. We are happy to see the outpouring of support for Spookware, but we are saddened to see that Dread XP has been getting harassed after the previous statement that we wrote together and the comments we made on itch. We'd like to say we do not condone these actions. What happened with Spookware was nobody's fault, and we are grateful for the support they have given us and the opportunity to make what we did. We have taken down our comments on the itch page, and we hope that this statement will finally settle the dust. We really like what we did with Spookware, and we are very grateful to be able to make cool games and have cool people play them. So thank you for all of your support over the years, and we hope you will keep supporting us. Adam, Thibault, and Victor, Beeswax Games. So I suppose that this is pretty self-explanatory. It's not that the developers never wanted or planned to finish Spookware, they simply ran out of money. The game didn't sold as well as they thought it would upon release, and that unfortunately meant that they couldn't secure enough funds in order to continue its development from their publisher. But just how badly did it go in terms of sales? While SteamDB isn't necessarily going to be 100% accurate, I believe it can still provide some reasonable data as to how a game performed in terms of popularity. So I decided to check, and yeah, it was bad, like really bad. With 0 players at the current moment and 2 players as its 24 hours peak, with 2 of these players being me and some other stranger, which by the way, if you're watching this video and you played Spookware lately, let me know down in the comments. I'm curious to see who was the only person playing this alongside me these past days. The all-time player peak occurred practically 5 years ago, which was on the game's release, and that was also pretty bad. 52 concurrent players as your all-time peak is definitely a really bad number. I wanted to personally make an estimate of how much revenue this game generated, but I think I'm too dumb for that. Looking at the owner estimations on SteamDB, these 3 estimations will give an average of around 43,000 owners. Of course, that is most definitely not the case. I find it hard to believe for 43,000 people to own a game that had a 52 concurrent players all-time peak, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. If we are to take the lowest estimate of 16,000 owners, which I personally believe to be a highly inflated number, but we don't really have any other numbers to go by, and considering that this game used to cost 10 euros and now it costs 5 euros with 2.50 euros rounded up on discounts in at the present, it's hard to pinpoint exactly how much every person paid for each copy, so just for the sake of this discussion, let's stick to the present price of 5 euros. Now, out of these 16,000 owners, we have to consider how many of them didn't actually pay for their game or bought it from third-party resellers such as G2A. I think that if we were to combine free keys or keys bought elsewhere for cheaper prices, it will be safe to say that maybe out of these 16,000 owners, at least 10% of them did not generate any sort of revenue. But then there is also the issue of considering how many people refunded the game. So as you can see, it's really hard to make an accurate estimate of this, but just for the sake of the argument, let's say that another 15% refunded the game. So from 16,000 copies, 25% did not generate any revenue whatsoever. This would result in 12,000 copies generating revenue at €5 each copy average. Maybe we can estimate sales of $60,000. Of course, this number could be much lower than that or higher than that, but let's go with 60,000 for now, since there is no way to accurately know the exact number. So at 60,000 euros, Steam takes a cut of 30% in the sales, meaning that now we are left with a revenue of 42,000 euros. And now we also have to subtract taxes, which could easily be another 15%. So now we are at 35,000 euros, and now this final revenue must be split once again between the developers, Beeswax Games, and the publisher DreadXP. I think it would be safe to assume that DreadXP might have gotten the lion's share out of this, probably to cover the costs of the game's development, given that they funded it initially, at least according to the statement that were released, and then they'd have to take another cut to have an actual profit out of this investment. Even if we were to split this 50-50, it'd be 17,000 each to the developers and the publishers, which it might seem a lot, but it really isn't, and I can see how such a figure could pretty much warrant for the game to cease its development, as its finalization probably wouldn't have attracted too many new customers, or definitely not an amount that would have covered the costs required to actually fully develop the game. Of course, I need you to keep in mind that all of these numbers that I've talked about so far were just rough estimates by me, and I'm in no way good at making estimates. The source for most of these numbers was my own ass pull. But if you have a better estimate or think you could give me something more accurate, do let me know in the comments. I'd actually be pretty curious to find out. Personally, I believe that part of this failure in sales could be attributed to a lack of good marketing. I mean, the game was pretty much unknown to me until I randomly stumbled on it one day, and every single person I talked about this game with claimed they had never even heard of it before. I tried to look up trailers for the game on YouTube and noticed that all of the trailers posted for the game by DreadXP, at least on YouTube, had barely any views. So I think it will be safe to say that this game was sort of doomed from the start, sadly. I think this concludes the story of Spookware, but before ending the video, I do want to give praise where praise is due. I believe that despite everything, Spookware was still a good game, and I do not regret in the slightest the time I spent playing it. I love the graphics a lot, the artistic style is definitely great, the vast majority of the microgames were definitely fun to play, and they captured the spirit of WarioWare pretty well, both in terms of gameplay and humor and absurdity, and the soundtrack was also delightful. I really liked the soundtrack for this game. Overall, I think that Spookware was a good game, and more than that, a game that had huge amounts of unachieved potential. I wanted to say squandered, but that feels a bit harsh. Mostly because I believe the developers really tried their best with the game, although it would be nice if they'd thrown in one last final update to at least fix the few game-breaking bugs remaining in the game. But at this point, I think it's safe to say that will not happen. Do I recommend you to play this game? I mean, if you are fine with the amount of content that is present right now, then why not? It will definitely succeed in scratching the WarioWare itch if you have it. After all, it is still around 100 microgames for the measly price of €5. I'd say go for it if you want, but definitely temper your expectations and prepare yourself for the disappointment of an unfinished story. I wanted to thank everyone for watching this video until the end, and as always, I'd like to thank this channel's members for their support. It is, like always, highly appreciated. If you'd like to join them, you can do so through the join button down below. As always, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel for future content, and let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I will see you in the next one. Have a good night, and bye bye.